Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Jess. I hope you're doing well today. That was Mango, and now he is licking himself 3 feet away from me. Today we are starting a new reading vlog. This will also include my February reading wrap-up. I only read 4 books, these 4. February was a bit of a weird reading month. I feel like I was kind of slumping, like a bit of a book hangover from January's books, but also I knew that the month was going to be shorter. Even though it's not significantly shorter, it still feels like it's a lot less time. Honestly, 4 books for me is like a super low bar. I normally read like 5 or 6 books a month. But anyway, let's get into the reading wrap-up. I have coaxed my co-host into joining us. Hello, Mochi. Anyway, the first thing that I read this month is the guy she was interested in wasn't a guy at all. I always miss the interested in part of that. This is volume 1. It is a manga. It is very green. This is very, very visually striking. That was part of why I picked it up. It is kind of like obnoxiously green, but me and Mochi like it. This one is about a high school girl named Aya, and she goes to this CD shop after school, and there is a guy working there. He wears a black hoodie and a mask, and he's super cool, and Aya immediately has a huge crush on him. And this book is basically just a series of vignettes of Aya having a huge crush on this guy. We find out about this really quickly, and it is literally on the back of the book, but it is revealed that her crush is actually a girl from her class called Mitsuki. But yeah, this one is just hard to talk about because it was kind of hard to follow in the way that some manga tends to be. Especially maybe ones like this that were turned from like a webcomic into a manga, where it just kind of feels like a series of scenes stitched together and they don't have much like connecting through line. So I was definitely a little bit confused now and then, being like, what is happening? Like, where are we at now? What is the relation of this scene to the next scene? Things like that. But once you understand that it is kind of like episodic throughout the book, it does make it a little bit easier to follow. And the second half was definitely more like cohesive as well, where it was kind of like each scene was having to do with the same kind of plot line, if you could say that. So anyways, I did enjoy this. It isn't like anything groundbreaking or anything like that. I really just loved the visual style, and I think that honestly, just for the art alone, I'm gonna continue the series just because it is very beautiful. But I did give it a 3.5. Yeah, so that was the first thing that I read this month. Let's get into the next book, and that is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This one was a beast to read. It doesn't seem that large, like it's not a huge book by any means, but it felt colossal to get through. And I'm going to try my best not to say this word more than this one instance, because I catch myself saying it about this book all the time. It is a dense book. I've been talking about this book in my last vlog and in another video, and I say that word way too much. So it is super, super, super loaded with world building and lore, amazing character work, super unique magic system, really complex political machinations happening, and a really interesting narration style, and all of that just kind of makes this perfect. I mean, it's not perfect because I didn't give it a 5. In my opinion, I didn't like this one as much as the 5th season. I think the 5th season was incredible. But this one is still really, really great, and I'm really excited to pick up the next book in the series, which is The Stone Sky, I believe. This series is definitely like a little bit intimidating for me, but I'm so glad that I've picked it up, and I'm so glad that I've continued on through this. So in terms of the premise of this, or the premise of the series as a whole, because I cannot tell you a single thing about what is happening in this book without spoiling the first book, but this series is basically a post-climate crisis, like post-apocalyptic dystopian. This world is constantly being ravaged by storms and earthquakes and all sorts of natural disasters. And so society has kind of crumbled and rebuilt over and over and over. It really has that post-apocalyptic feel, in the sense that a lot of these communities that have sprung up in the wake of disaster feel very like ramshackle, is that the word? They feel very haphazard and very tenuous. Wow, look at me with all my words today. But it really does feel like everybody is just surviving. They are just doing their absolute best, trying to not get wiped out by the next earthquake, basically. And surrounding that whole climate crisis situation, there's also a magic system called orogeny, which is basically geothermal kind of earth magic. There are people who are called orogenes who can harness the kind of like raw power of Father Earth, they call it, and they can channel that energy into various effects. I have returned. My fiance got home, so I had to say hi. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, so people have naturally kind of become afraid of orogeny and treat people that are orogenes really, really horribly. There's also this organization called the Fulcrum, which is basically a very militant academy for orogenes, where they have these people called guardians who go out and find orogene children and bring them back to the Fulcrum to be trained into like the perfect weapon for the state, basically. The major like political power in this world, they use origins to neutralize a lot of the destruction. So because of all the stigma and a lot of the political strife around orogeny, many of them live in hiding and just live in fear. If they are discovered in the communities, like I said, they might be killed or exiled. So with all of that political tension going on and with the catastrophic state of the world, that's kind of the atmosphere going into book 1, and it just kind of gets worse throughout the series. So everything just keeps escalating, and there's so much wild shit that happens in these books. When I was reading this for my other video, I was like a quarter in. I had no idea what was going to happen. I was like 75% in. I had no idea what was going to happen. At no point did I know what was going to happen next and what the characters were going to do. A lot of them are so morally gray that you really cannot predict what they're going to do, and that makes them very, very interesting to follow. They're always surprising you and keeping you on your toes. Suffice to say, I really enjoyed this book. I really like this series. I did give this one 4 stars. I think I gave the 5th season 4.5 stars. It is a really, really great dystopian sci-fi series if you like that, especially if you want like climate-y, earth magic stuff. It's very cool. He's a spicy guy. Oh, I made him mad. All right, the next book that I read is The Maid and the Crocodile. This is in the same universe as the Raybearer Redemptor books, which are right here. It is not the 3rd one in that series. It's kind of just a interconnected standalone. It follows a different main character than the duology, but there are characters that come up in this book that are from the duology. So if you haven't read the duology, I would do that before picking this one up. This one is set 10 years after the duology and follows our main character, Sade. She is an orphan and she has just aged out of the orphanage that she was basically raised in. And so she tries to find work as a maid, but she's not just a maid. She's also what's called a curse eater. I believe curse eating was not mentioned in the duology. I think it's just in this one. But basically curse eaters are people who can see this material called spirit silt, or she calls it spirit silt. It's this kind of glowing, glittery substance that's everywhere. It is kind of like spores. It's shed off of people. It is a byproduct basically of emotion. And so she can see it when she sings. That is her like curse eating ability. And so as a curse eating maid, that is what she does, is she sings, she sees the spirit silt, and then she cleans it. And anything that cannot be cleaned, this is where the eating of the curse eating comes in. Anything that is too strong to be cleaned by normal means, they have to eat to get rid of the curse. But the whole thing with the spirit silt and the magic system in this is so interesting. It feels so Studio Ghibli to me, and I mentioned that in my last video as well, that it feels like Spirited Away or Howl's Moving Castle. Kind of like, it reminds me of the soot sprites from Spirited Away. And honestly, I was kind of, when I was imagining this in my head, when I was imagining the book in my head, I was imagining it in like a Studio Ghibli art style. It felt like an animated movie to me. This kind of feels like it could be a Studio Ghibli movie. It really does. Especially with this mysterious crocodile god that Sade becomes kind of tied to, connected to during this book. And on top of those elements, there's also really fascinating discussions going on in this. There's really great themes going on, mostly around classism and oppression, exploitation of the poor, of laborers, and laborers' freedoms and rights, calling out the wealth disparity and privilege. Also gets a lot into agency and independence as well, because that's something that Sade has always had struggles with, is her agency. And it's nice to see her in this story kind of grappling with that and learning that she does have agency, finding her power. The big theme kind of in this as well is rebellion and the power of the people to incite change. But I really go into it a lot in my vlog, so I really recommend that you watch that if you want to hear more about this one. And I just really honestly enjoyed this book a lot. I think it's a very solid standalone, and I do think that, like I said, you should read the Raybearer and Redemptor books before you get into this one, but I highly recommend reading those two and this one because Jordan Fueco's writing is just so fantastic. I really love the themes that she addresses in her universe and in her books. I think if you want a West African mythology inspired fantasy with really great themes, really great character dynamics, and a really unique magic system, I would look into into them. They're really, really good. So that's the third book that I read this month. All right, so the last book that I read this month is Hammajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. This one is a cyberpunk sci-fi heist book, and it follows our main character Edie, who was just released from prison, and she has been sprung free, paid her way out of prison by kind of her rival nemesis, Angel. Angel and Edie grew up together. They've known each other all their life, and they used to work together in like the crime sphere, but then Angel betrayed Edie, basically ratted her out, and that's what got Edie thrown in jail. But the reason that Angel paid Edie's way out of jail is that she needs Edie for another job, another heist, and this one is for big, big, big stakes. It very much follows the normal like heist movie, heist book kind of format, where it's very Ocean's 8 inspired. You kind of have your character duo that starts the team, and then they go and they build their team out. They recruit people. They all have different jobs. They all get recruited in different ways, but you kind of get to see them build this crew. Also, this is my Illumicrate edition, and it has this great police lineup artwork on the front and back. And it's nice just to get like a visual of the crew. I did like that I was able to see them. The art is great. I will say this edition is really pretty. I have kind of mixed feelings on this one. I unfortunately was kind of let down by it. There are elements that I really liked, but there are also some elements that I didn't really like that much, and after thinking about it more and reading some other reviews and just kind of seeing how people put it into words, I kind of agree with a lot of the criticisms of this book. I did give it a 3-star, perfectly middle of the road, although I guess middle of the road would technically be 2.5. So as far as things I liked about it, I did think that it was a fun, like, heist, Ocean's 8 kind of story. It's not like anything groundbreaking or super revolutionary, but it is like a fun kind of book. It's fast-paced at parts. It does kind of slog in the middle. Honestly, the more that I think about it, I might drop it to a 2.5 because I don't really have that many positives to say. I love the representation, first of all. The representation is really, really fantastic. I will give that to it. It has really great Hawaiian rep because the author is Hawaiian. It has really great trans rep. It has really great LGBTQ plus as a whole rep. But I feel like as much as I love the representation, I just don't think that there's enough substantial in here to make like a good story on its own. I think part of the issue with this is that it's all about this heist crew and this found family, this really close connection that they have, allegedly, but it doesn't really feel like any of the characters are actually that close. It doesn't feel like the bond that they build and the crew that they build is worth sacrificing everything for. Like, it doesn't feel really well earned. The romance in this is also really toxic. Like, as much as I was kind of like kicking my feet at some points, I do think that there were some moments that were pretty like hot, honestly, where the like nemesis to lovers thing really kind of sparks. I do think that is good, but there's not enough time for them to like turn that around and flip it into a genuinely loving relationship. And a lot of the side characters, like I said, they weren't really well established. They kind of just felt like a cardboard cutout with this title, this role on the team, like stamped on them. I think that if you don't mind a main character who's like kind of annoying and kind of a pain in the ass sometimes, you might not mind it, but I do think that Edie is definitely kind of written to be a little bit frustrating because she wants to be really loyal to her family and she wants to provide and she wants to protect them and she wants to do everything for them. But she also keeps going like back and forth and back and forth and back and forth throughout the whole book of being like, I'm gonna go straight, I'm not gonna be into crime, I'm going to do this the right way to protect my family and to not get thrown in jail again. But then she's like, but I actually really like crime though. And so it's just like kind of frustrating to see her go back and forth. And some of the choices that she makes for the sake of the heist crew or for the sake of Angel, and it's putting like her own family and her own future at risk. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about this. Like I said, I love the representation in here. I also love that I learned a lot about Hawaiian Pidgin, which I'll put the definition somewhere on the screen because I don't remember it exactly, but it was really cool to see a different language that you don't normally get to see. And a lot of the times in this where I saw a word that I didn't know, I was looking it up and seeing what it meant and kind of remembering that later on when it would come up again. So I will say that it was really neat to see that. I always love when a book can teach me something new, especially integrated into the world in a realistic way. But I also wish that this elaborated more on the sci-fi as well. I think that as much as it was like taking place in the future and set on a space station, it doesn't feel like we're in space at any point. It never talks about space. It never really talks about how people feel about their removal, their detachment from Earth. And it's this massive city that is set in a space station, which is neat. I do like the concept of this like kilometer colossal city with skyscrapers and everything, but in a space station. I think that is really neat. I wanted more sci. I wanted more sci in my fi, you know? I think this would definitely be for some people. I think if you really like a heist story, if you don't mind the kind of like cliche heist movie, action movie stuff happening, there were some funny moments in here. It had some humor. And if you like a found family, even if it is a little bit like superficial, it is still represented in here. So maybe look into it. So those are the 4 books I read in February. That is it for my wrap up section of this vlog.